All right. Welcome, dear friends. We are so very excited. I'm so excited to be here for the last in a series of really amazing and beautiful community conversations that we, Blue, have hosted over the last year. We began this journey with the Whose Faith Is It Anyway panel back in January. We had some incredible panelists come on and proclaim a Black Unitarian Universalism. And from that point, from February on, we have had a community conversation each month focusing on our 7 principles of Black lives. And so tonight, we are here focusing on our 7th principle, right? There has been deep longing for all of us as Black UUs to go deeper in terms of our understanding of a Black UU theology and what that framework might look like. And we have been using and offering up these 7 principles as a foundation for that conversation. I am so very grateful that we get to be here tonight, not only with my comrades and friends from the Organizing Collective Board of Directors, many of us are here, but also our 360 Council of Elders is also here. And so what I will do very, very quickly but deliberately is just read aloud our 7th principle as we do at the start of every conversation. Welcome, 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 welcome. The 7th principle is one in which we focus on a 360-degree vision. It says, we honor the past struggles and wisdom from our elders. The work we do today builds the foundations of movements of tomorrow. We consider our mark on future generations. It goes on to say, acknowledging the ways in which a supremacist society diminishes us all is a critical part of the work of the movement for Black lives. When the most marginalized of our society is free, then we will all truly be free. We call on our faith to affirm the truth that only when Black lives matter will all lives truly matter. And as Dr. King said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all. So grateful to be here. Want to turn it over to my co-facilitator, Dr. Takia Amin, Blue's content director and co-convener of the symposium, as we go forth in our conversation.
Good evening, everybody. So glad to be here with you. Really excited about this evening's conversation. As Michael said, this conversation is the end of a series of community conversations that Blue decided to hold this year, kicking off in January with our Whose Faith Is It Anyway panel, and culminating in our upcoming symposium, which we'll talk about at the end of our time together. We're really excited that in conversation this evening, we have members of our Blue 360 Council, the body of elders who have been invited into perpetuity to help us, guide us, support, and encourage us. The Blue 360 Council provides advice and counsel to the Organizing Collective Board. They offer direct support to Blue leadership through historical insight, experience, and wisdom. They serve as ambassadors of Blue's goals and vision and endeavor to protect the integrity of our organization. And we're really, really pleased and proud to have members of our 360 Council here with us this evening. I'm going to quickly go through the list. And as I say your name, please unmute yourself. Okay, please unmute yourself and say hello to those folks who are assembled. First, I am thrilled to have Ms. Carmelita Carter Sykes here with us. Carmelita, can you unmute yourself and say hey to the people?
Hello, everybody. I'm ecstatic about being here with you today.
Yay!
That's it.
Woohoo! We have Ms. Carol Carter Walker. Ms. Carol, can you unmute and say hello to the people?
Good evening. I'm really happy to be here. I've been looking forward to this community gathering for a long time.
Wonderful. Thank you. Miss Paula Cole Jones. Miss Paula, are you there? Can you unmute and holler at the folks?
Hello, everyone. It's good to be here. Good to see you all. I've been a little busy, but I'm glad that I could sign in this evening. I think I may have been was I on your first community call?
Yeah.
Back in January? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you for making time to be with us this evening.
Absolutely.
Baba Ntangalizi Sanyika, will you unmute yourself and say hello to the community?
Ambo, good evening, everyone. It's good to be on the conversation. I am excited about the interaction and the dialogue. I think the questions that you have prepared for us will be very, very interesting. And I'm looking forward to this conversation. Thank you.
Miss Elizabeth Ann Terry, will you unmute and greet the community, please?
Hello, beloveds. It's so wonderful to be here on this call that's awash in melanin. Thank you so much. Good evening.
We also have Lena K. Gardner from the Organizing Collective Board, Samuel Prince, and the Reverend Kimberly Quinn Johnson also here with us this evening. Lena K., I need to come to you really quickly. And, I read at the top of our intros sort of what the purpose of the Blue 360 Council is. But can you talk to us just a little bit for folks who, weren't privy to those conversations and share how it is that we sort of came to the decision to have a Blue Elders Council?
Yeah, thank you for that invitation. So I think part of it was from the inception of Blue, we recognized we would love and appreciate guidance from elders. Even as when we first started, we didn't exactly know who those folks were going to be. And then coming out of the convening, it became really clear. Several of you on this call were there. And I think I distinctly remember Baba talking about love and supporting us in anything he can do. And we really just took that to heart. We also, I think, recognize that one of the inheritances of Black liberation work is that it's really an honor to have our elders with us, because a lot of them have been stolen from us from one way or another, whether they were assassinated or impoverished, just a lot of different things. And so we wanted to find a way to honor that legacy and honor the folks who are able to still be with us and offer that guidance and support. And that's really what it came down to, a recognition of one, wanting to honor our elders and the work they've done and come before us, and also a deep need for guidance and love. And I would say too, without some of our other folks in our community have a lot of they bring a more critical approach to just the space. And I think when you're in the heat of organizing something brand new for liberation, sometimes that criticalness will wear you down. And so I think we've been particularly grateful for the ways in which our elders have shown up with grace and compassion and love in particular.
Thank you so much for that, Lena. Miss Elizabeth, I'm actually going to start with you. And I was wondering if you could just share with the community briefly, why did you agree to work with Blue as an elder?
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Amin. Well, one simple answer is that Michael asked me. But that's not the whole story. I feel that for a while within Unitarian Universalism, we let Mark Morrison Reed do the heavy lifting about telling stories of Black folks within Unitarianism, Universalism, and Unitarian Universalism. And we all have a story. We all have a story about that, about how we found the faith and sort of showed up and said, where's this been? That the faith was resonating with me so strongly, and this is what I believe, was kind of like crooked, and it kind of wasn't on point, but the basic foundation of Unitarian Universalism, especially Universalism, was exactly where my heart was. So part of it is that I don't have children. I have nieces and nephews. And so then I think about younger people in the faith as my children, like Michael. And so wanting to be there as an elder, elders have been there for me my whole life. And it's just a rich, rich blessing. I was in Cincinnati for Reverend Connie's installation, and Reverend Mitra from St. John's Unitarian Church took me on a tour. And I don't know if I can share my screen. Is that possible, Michael?
I don't know
let me
that
see if I can.
Maybe you can.
Maybe I can. Let me see if I can now find what I wanted to share. Here it is. And she took me past the grave of Reverend W.H.G. Carter, who I had never heard of. You see on his tombstone, it says pioneer Unitarian minister who started a Black Unitarian church in Cincinnati. And while he got no respect during his life, he's like somebody that I wanted to bring into this gathering. I'm so excited about being able to attend the symposium. And I moved to North Carolina, and sort of like there's a North Carolina majority here, I'm just saying. But I moved to North Carolina from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and I like that the symposium, both of the namesakes for the symposium have like deep Philadelphia roots. And the first Unitarian congregation that I was a member of was First Unitarian, and I would sort of like do some time travel and think about sitting there with Frances Ellen Watkins Harper, and became so enamored of her writing and thinking about what would it have been like to hear her speak. I'm not saying I'm Frances Ellen Watkins Harper, but what I am saying is that there's all these elders and ancestors that each of us have a window into, and we can bring it to the group as a whole. Long answer to.
Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate that. Miss Carol, I'm coming to you. If you could also share with us why you agreed to come on and serve and work with us as a Blue Elder.
Well, to be very frank, my first instinct was I was flattered. It appealed to my ego. And then when I realized who the other people were, I got scared because I thought, I don't belong in this group. What do I have? And then my third reaction was, frankly, well, these are people from whom I can learn and from whom I can support. So I think those were the three things: vanity, a sense of awe with the other people involved, and the sense that I could be supportive. It's like somebody that I've sung in a lot of choirs, and it's like this woman described herself as I'm not a soloist, I'm a chorister. And even though I'm in a leadership role in many other aspects of my life, I feel like I'm a chorister in this group, and I really appreciate that opportunity.
I love your honesty. It's always so refreshing. Miss Paula, how about you? Can you share with us why you agreed to come and serve with us as a Blue Elder?
Yeah, so Carol Carter Walker and I were at the first convening of Black Lives Matter in Cleveland, Ohio, right? And when the collective was organizing, Carol and I were sitting together, and the miscommunication around location. So I think that, I'm not going to speak for Carol, but certainly for me, I was always interested in it from the beginning. I grew up Unitarian Universalist. Used to go to church with my mother, who's no longer living. The minister who really made the biggest impact on my UU identity was Reverend David H. Eaton, who I understand really did a lot in terms of the diversity that the association experienced, as he really experienced diversity and all souls. But anyway, the elders have always been a part of my own UU identity. When we went to the first convening for Blue, and Dr. Sanyika was there telling his story, and I was able to patch this missing piece of history, whatever happened to Haywood Henry. And he said, some of you will have known me as Haywood Henry, and I was just floored. And so there was that eldership there. There's a lot that could be said about that. I won't, but that was intriguing. So when you all invited us to join the 360 Council, I was at a point in my life where I was kind of wrestling with this thing about aging, and I wasn't ready to take on the senior identity. And it was coming at me from a lot of different directions. But when Blue asked me, I really thought differently about it. And from a cultural perspective, there are many places in society where the culture around eldership is not acknowledged. And so I thought it was fascinating that Blue was being formed, bringing that cultural value into the organizing. And so I accepted my elder status because of Blue's invitation. And I'm happy to be here. And the work continues.
It surely does. It surely does. Miss Carmelita, how about you? What made you agree to come and work with us?
Hi,
You hear me?
Miss Carmelita, you're ready to go.
Thank you. Thank you. I considered it one of the privileges and of my an elder for Blue. I have been an activist all my life and have been very active. I've been a UU for 32 years, a member of my church for 17. Struggle in politics and Democratic Party politics and unions and that sort of thing. That is my history. I found that in UUism, the struggle continues, as Paula says. It was there. One likes to think or aspire that when you are at your church, pressure is relieved, stress lifts away, and everything is something that's going to be forced. That was not the case. The struggle continues, and it's I figure it's a part of my 74 years of life. Blue, it made me stop and think and made me aware of the needs I had to feel the support back, to get something back for myself. It's a place. These are, I'm a person who does not have children either. And I've been an educator for, in public schools for 40 years, and I'm an educator program at my church for about 7. So it is my nature to want to share experiences and find out what's going on with people. So people I feel I can trust, I can support and be supported by by people. So it made me feel there is something that's going to happen when I'm not any longer, and it made me feel so. I feel it's a kind of progress. I'm seeing progress at my church. I'm seeing progress in the U.S. Explain how good that makes me feel. So this is a privilege to be associated with Blue for me.
Thank you so much. Now, Baba, I'm coming to you last with this question because after you respond, I'm going to stay with you for a follow-up question. So if you could unmute yourself and talk to us a little bit about why you agreed to accept the invitation to serve as an elder, that would be great. And then stay unmuted because I'm going to come back to you directly with a follow-up question.
Okay. Well, thank you all very much for providing the opportunity to be a part of what I consider to be a historical vindication of a very long journey and an important part of my own development as a human being. When I was younger, in my active movement days, when I was a part of SNCC Corps and NAACP, the civil rights movement, and deeply engaged in the struggles in the South to desegregate the South, part of what we always were taught was that there were generations that had come before us who had paid a price and made the sacrifice that we might be where we were at that time. Now, of course, we were the younger generation then. We were comparable to the millennials today, I would suppose, and we were impatient and we were insisting that change happen now and it must happen immediately, and that we were sick and tired of being sick and tired and all those sorts of things. But there were times when the elders, those wiser, more experienced than us, just sat us down and gave us history lessons of the struggles that they had been through and the sacrifices that they had made and the price that they had paid, that we would even have the opportunity to be able to sit in and have a legal system behind us that the elders themselves had cultivated. The infrastructure for us to be activists was there because of the elders. That was a critical lesson in my life. Around about 2017, I heard that the Unitarian Universalists had done something that I didn't believe. I heard that they had made a commitment to provide $5 million to the Black constituency of the church to continue the racial justice work. Now, I was struggling with the 50-year cycle at that time, because 1967 was when we started the Black Unitarian Universalist Caucus, the first modern day version of Blue, if you would. Blue is, to me, a historical successor to that era of struggle. And so when I saw that, I was just totally floored. I thought I was in a fantasy world. I didn't believe that the UUA had done something like that. I didn't believe that the circle had seemingly now been complete, and that there was an entity in place, an emerging entity of Black Unitarian Universalists in these times, in this day, that was continuing the struggle, luta continua, the struggle that we waged so valiantly and were often persecuted because of that struggle and misunderstood and often abused, which is part of why we left the denomination 50-some years ago. So the Spirit said to me, this is something that you need to be connected with, because I felt almost as though we had birthed a new group of human beings, a more advanced group of human beings who had received the baton that we had passed on, that we had left in all of the miasmatic confusion that we had gone through. So there was something we did that was inherited by another generation. And that just excited my spirit and lifted me to a higher level. And so when I came to New Orleans, my home city, that just was an additional incentive. My home city, I was coming home to my home city, and I was being asked to come by this newly emerging entity. It just did so much good to my soul to feel that we had been historically vindicated. Now, I believe that elders counsel and younger people make the wars. And so when asked to be a part of something that I was already doing, which was trying to help younger generations understand the struggles that had gone on before them and pass on whatever knowledge and skills and wisdom I had developed to new generations, especially of African American young people, this just felt natural. It felt like God had just put me here to say, blessed are these young ones who have got the word and they're taking it to the next level. So I was just humbled with the opportunity to give anything and everything I could to give back to this generation who had received the baton that we had passed and be able to say, well done, my younger sisters and brothers. Now let's move together to the next phase of this struggle. So all of that was going on within my soul, and it's still going on with my soul, and I'm still excited because the story is still unfolding. And to have the opportunity to be a part of that unfolding is just marvelous vindication and joy for me as a Baba, one who is an elder as determined by the African traditions that I am a part of and other groups that I'm a part of. But to be able to do that, this group has a very special character and vindication for my life's work.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Baba. I appreciate your heartfelt energy. It radiates right off the screen. So thank you. I wanted to stay with you with this follow-up question and ask specifically if you can speak to maybe one way that you see Blue explicitly building on the work of previous generations in our faith. Is there one way in particular that stands out to you in terms of how Blue is continuing the legacy of the work that you mentioned?
Oh, absolutely. For one thing, to me, I see Blue as the epitome of what we were trying to do with Black humanism. I see it as having inherited it. It's almost as though Blue was present when we articulated our view that says, quote, we are a fellowship of Black humanists. In 1969, that's the quote we put in the Black Unitarian Universalist Caucus's Constitution, trying to develop alternative constellations of power, build alternative institutions to bring justice and peace and reconciliation to the world. It's almost as though Blue has been the reincarnation of that earlier movement. The difference that I see that matters so much is this. Blue has the opportunity to develop a Black Unitarian Universalist worldview without white supremacy asphyxiating it before it could be developed fully. That's where we were. We were trying to go there, but there was panic all over the place when we tried to go there. There was panic among some of our own people, and there was panic among other people that did not allow us to cultivate the very ideas that you all are trying to cultivate in Blue now towards what you're calling a theology. We simply call it a worldview. And the very notion that you've decided to call yourself a church was always on our agenda because we, along with other Black Protestants, were threatening to leave the churches we were in and form a new Black church. And lo and behold, Blue is doing exactly that in a different way somewhat, but you've got the spirit of what has come before you. And it seems like there's continuity of thought. And the thing that's so fascinating is that you've got the space to do it. You got the space to do it, that supremacy has not interrupted your process to the point that you are able to think clearly and say to the institution, this is where we stand. And you can't do anything about where we stand, not on this question. Maybe there's some others. Now, you've got 7 principles. The 7 principles of Kwanzaa. and there's 7 principles of UUism. I don't think there's an accident to any and all of that. I think that that's a type of continuity. Even the 7th principle that is within your blue statement that we elders are operating with, the 7th principle in UUism talks about the web, the interdependent web of all humanity. Right here, we talk about the mutuality of all life that Dr. King talked about. That's also one of the principles of Kwanzaa called Ujima, collective work and responsibility. My sisters and brothers' problems are my problems, and we are not free until all are free. That's the core principle of Black humanism. So I just see all these things being integrated now that we were struggling to validate way back in the day, that you have the space today to develop more fully. Even to be able to have that symposium. We had conversations of the type we're going to have at the symposium, but we were never able to just boldly say, we are Black Unitarian Universalists are having a symposium of this nature. So I think you have established some space to develop the thought process, the worldview, the systems of value, the approach to how you integrate culture and faith around the liberatory project that's extremely unique. And it's a continuity and continuation of the past. But the difference is this: I think you can challenge some of the sacred assumptions of the institution that we did not have the time to finish, because we were always locked in battle about whether they were going to fund us or not fund us, and how Black could we be, because some of our own people were still uncertain about that. So I say you learned some lessons from the past. You clearly understood some of the limitations, problems, and difficulties of the past, and you have developed them to a higher level of order, understanding of consciousness, of integration and development. And so that makes you extraordinarily unique and different from us. But the torch has been passed to another generation. You are not replicating what our generation did. You have taking it to an altogether new and different level. And certainly that I applaud, and I'm excited and looking forward to that.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. Along those same lines, Ms. Carmelita, I want to come to you. Can you share with us maybe one way that you see Blue building on the work of previous generations in this faith? You know, Michael and I spent a lot of time in planning and doing the groundwork for Symposium, reflecting on a lot of the work that Black folks in this faith have done in terms of institution building and other efforts to move towards a liberatory space. And I'm wondering if you could speak to, in your experience, maybe one way that you see Blue building on the work that has come before.
I think that, can you hear me? I think that I feel good about what you're doing now. I know that it has made a difference in many ways on my outlook of some things. I had a particular suppose, or at least my actions appeared to show, that if I separated myself away from certain unpleasantries, that was, if I could separate myself from overt racism, and then that was the solution to all problems. When I was in college, I was a member of the Africa. It's interesting, when I've gone to look that up at the Library of Congress, you can't even find anything about that, which is interesting. But I've made myself look at and consider ism is. It is not, it means I am accepting of other people. And that doesn't mean people who look exactly like me or who have my have responsibility to bring all of us into community, no matter who we are, no matter what race we were born into. I have made a applied in reality more of the spiritual message from that I've gotten from this is something spiritual. This does have meaning to me. This is a part of me. This is my history. But there are others who can also benefit from that knowledge. And an application of my intelligence and what I have learned, and make it a spiritual thing. It is not a separate thing. And I think that Blue can continue to support persons who are working and want to work in this way. These things are possible. This is what happened. This is what happened to this many situations. Sharing yourself and sharing what you've learned and sharing your knowledge. And I'm certainly not too old to and want to learn. You know, what do I need to read? What do I need to be familiar with? What are the things that I, as an elder, should be thinking about and discussing with others? So I see Blue as a support that will continue. I don't think we don't have to deal with racism. So Blue is adding to its repertory of devices and things that can be done with people, move us all into community together in the world.
Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate that vision of, you know, sometimes I say to people, I'm a communitarian universalist, you know. So I appreciate the vision of moving us to share community. Miss Paula, I'm coming to you. And I'm coming to you specifically because, you know, I know you've been around for a while and you've experienced a lot of different things in the institutional faith and also growing up in this faith. Can you share one way that you see Blue building on the work that's been done in the past, building on that legacy of other Black folks who served in this tradition before us?
Yes, and I'm going to do it in 3 points. So let's say 1 is reconciling the past, 2 is holding Black space, and 3 is UU values in the public square. So with the reconciling, at the first Blue convening, Dr. Senyeka really was a critical factor for me, because I've been using, for all these years, I've been doing workshops and running dialogues on race and ethnicity, and trying to make sure that people see the video, Black Pioneers in the White Denomination, based on Mark Morrison Reed's book, The History of Black Ministers and Their Acceptance or Lack of in the Association. But then also Wilderness Journey told that story where the previous effort that Dr. Senyeka was a part of, it showed the story of how it ended, a version of that story. And so 50 years later, exactly 50 years later, here he is in front of us. And he witnessed not just what Blue was doing, but he also witnessed 3 UU presidential candidates who could all speak fluently about anti-racism and our movement. And when the story in Wilderness Journey was really about the inability of the president, Dana Greeley at that time, to lead the association to a different place. Now, I would say they really weren't equipped to do it, but that's the point is, here were 3 presidential candidates. And I watched Dr. Senyeka, and when he decided he was going to move forward with Blue, that to me was a major piece of us reconciling with our history. Doesn't mean that the brokenness and the pain and all of that is, the damage is done, but it's like an affirmation of what we have learned, what we were doing in all those years. So that was a critical piece. Blue holds Black space like nowhere else in this association that I know. So holding that space where we really do get to be our full selves and embracing the cultural history of African Americans, as well as the liberating values of Unitarian Universalism, and all the art and all the spiritual and all the pain of our humanity and the joys and love of it. Blue holds that space like no one else does. And I imagine, I don't know, but I imagine the previous effort of the Black Empower movement was holding it that way at that time. So that's the second one. And then the third one is one that some of you have heard me say. I think that blue is just a tremendous irony in this association. And I love it. It's absolute beauty. What's universal about Unitarian Universalism you can see in blue. And that is Black people standing in public, activists standing in their UU values and the Black culture and Black body in a way that anyone that meets blue or sees blue in action in the community is seeing, Dr. Sanyika, you said, you're seeing a whole new person, a whole new entity birth from that combination. And the irony is, if they came to our churches, that would not be their experience. So I don't know what to do with that other than blue is holding this incredible space. I know the Black Empowerment movement was holding that kind of a space in community. And I think that blue is leading the Unitarian Universalist Association at a pace that it could never go on its own, and into a much more authentic, inclusive community of the future. And so that's my answer.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. And that framing is really helpful. We know that soon after symposium, one of our tasks will be to write something articulating the Black Unitarian Universalist worldview or theological perspective that we are forwarding, which really grows out of a recognition that the way in which we think about Unitarian Universalism, practice Unitarian Universalism, and share it is different in some really important and remarkable ways than other folks who share this living tradition with us. Along those lines, Miss Elizabeth, I want to come to you because I know how passionate you are about Unitarian Universalism. And one of the things that Michael and I were talking about just earlier today is that one of the things we hope Black folks would embrace about this tradition is that when we look at the history of Black Unitarians, Black Universalists, and Black Unitarian Universalists, that we don't just look at those things as discrete historical plot points, but rather as source material for how to live our shared tradition. That when we look at how Black Universalists refracted their faith through the work they did in community, that tells us something about how to live this faith. Yes. That when we look at the movements that Black Unitarians chose historically to align themselves with, that says something to us about how we are to practice Unitarian Universalism, so that we would make a leap between just seeing that as history and understanding the lives of our forebears as source material, right, for this people's theology that we're trying to articulate and live. So I want to ask you, and I'm going to come to you also, Carol and Baba, with this question of what's one thing you'd like to see Black UUs acknowledge or embrace about our faith or about our living tradition?
Like when I think about Frances Ellen Watkins Harper and how she was in the world, And she was a member of First Unitarian Church Philadelphia and also Mother Bethel AME Church in Philadelphia. And she was an activist of temperance and women's rights and Black rights and educating people who had been emancipated from slavery. And that's the intersectionality that Unitarianism, Unitarian Universalism has finally gotten around talking about, that intersectionality. But it's there in our roots as Black people in this faith. That's one thing. Another thing is that I see the example of Blue that is showing that our faith is not just about brick and mortar places, that community happens other ways. And community is a voluntary association. We choose to be together. And so people these days are choosing to be together, not in brick and mortar places. So Blue is showing how to be in community as Unitarian Universalists in a covenanted, sacred way that's different from going someplace on a Sunday morning. Even though I like to go where I go on Sunday morning, but I feel that the intersectionality and being in community in a different way that makes sense for this day and age, because it's about shared values and shared culture, and being able to bring that all together in this like really delicious and exciting way, that we have that as Blue to like share with not just Unitarian Universalism, but a way to be sacred in the world, in community. I sort of like went off somewhere with your question, but I just like love how we are here now, and this is community right here, right now, and the configuration might be different some other time. You know, like I've been to a few of these community conversations and it's been fabulous, but it's not always the same people, and that's the way life happens. Thank you.
No, I love you lifting up that intentional choosing to be together, intentional choosing to be with each other in community with integrity as sort of a cornerstone of the way that we live out our shared tradition. Miss Carol, I'm coming to you. What is something that you'd like to see Black UUs acknowledge or embrace about our faith? I'll say another thing that has come up for us is, you know, a lot of times Unitarian Universalism is framed as, you know, y'all have heard me say this before, the good white folks tradition. And somehow like we should just be grateful to be here as guests in this house. Blue is doing a lot to push back on that, and also to push back on the notion that Unitarian Universalism is only New England. You know, if you're looking at Black Unitarian Universalism, then it's also Norfolk, Virginia, and Chicago and other places. So even troubling the way we think about our geography feels important. So what's one thing, Ms. Carol, that you'd like to see Black UUs acknowledge or embrace about our faith? You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
We used to have a minister at our church who said, revelation is not sealed. And I think that's where we are with Blue. There's nothing that we can't really accomplish. I mean, when I think about, how far Blue has come from that convening to now, it's just amazing. And I guess in all fairness, we have to give a shout out to the internet. Because if it weren't for our connection that way, we wouldn't be able to do that. But I would say that what I think in the Black community in general is an understanding of the way in which music and other forms of creative expression contribute to the total worship experience. And I think that's something we can proudly claim and stand on the rock of. And I think that's something that is really very important to me, is being able to do that even in like this space where we're not being able to, we're using a kind of a virtual community. But I think that that's something that we can definitely bring to Unitarian Universalism. And I know that's the reverse of the question you asked. But what I think Unitarian Universalists can bring to us is the sense that we're working on heaven on earth. The idea that we're not looking for something, in the great beyond, that is one of the tenets of the faith, that we're working here for a better world. We're not, pushing it on to the next phase, so to speak. And I think that's something that we can take from our faith of Unitarian Universalism and bring to the greater world.
Yeah, the idea that we are committed to, if you know what life is worth, you will fight for yours on earth, right? Thinking about how we can make our shared living experience more just, loving, and equitable while we're here. Baba, I'm coming to you. Something you'd like to see that, as we're talking about it, one thing you'd like to see Black UUs acknowledge or embrace about this living tradition. Coming to you, Baba.
Well, there are many things that I've, of course, been reflecting on this question for a very, very long period of time in terms of the unique contributions that we, as a culture, bring to the table. One of the things that strikes me about the relationships that we have with our European fellow Europeans is our sense of culture is holistic. Their sense of culture tends to be more isolated. They want to think of culture as singing and dancing and art, as opposed to the holistic notion of culture as a total way of life. So that the religious experience for us and our spirituality is a total experience. It's not bifurcated the way that we separate the secular, for instance, and the spiritual, and put them in compartments as though there's no intersection between them. It's completely false. The same way that this denomination tries to separate the intellectual side of life from the emotive and expressive side of life, I think is another one of those falsities. In our tradition, as an African descended people, we have always believed those things to be integrated as a continuum, all the way back to the land of our ancestors. The way we saw the world was far more integrated than bifurcated or trifurcated, the way I think some of the sterile New England Unitarians especially have done to the faith, and have given it a bad name and a bad reputation. That's one point. A second point, though, I think is one of the things that I think Black UUs today can contribute that has never been done, and that is to add the African traditional religious experience to the equation. When we talk about all the other faiths of the world and the great world's religions, never is there any mention of an African traditional religion as having contributed anything to this discourse. We know that's a falsity, and that's just supremacy. It's just straight out white supremacy to ignore the role of Kemetic thinking, for instance, in ancient Egyptian religion, Ma'at, or to ignore even what may have come from some of the more contemporary African traditional religions like the Yoruba faith, the Dogon, or even when we discuss humanism. I don't think many humanist thinkers in the denomination have ever thought about studying Akan humanism, to integrate all of the ways that African descended people worldwide have made enormous contributions. As I remember, not only were there something called 7 principles that UUism prides itself in, but there's something they call the 6 sources, the sources of the faith. I don't see anything there that references us. I mean, one could argue, yeah, well, you can find us in there, but if you want to highlight some others, where's our story? And so when we talk about our contribution, I think Black UUs have rich sources that can be referenced in our understanding, our global understanding of what constitutes a comprehensive and holistic worldview that balances our spirituality between the secular and the sacred, and that allows us to express ourselves in our worship dimension, in integrating our culture with our ideas. All of those unique contributions, I think, are there just asking for us to put them on the table, because the other people are not going to do that. If they are to ever become whole, it seems to me that contributions of people of diverse histories and cultures will have to be integrated in a conscious way, not as an afterthought. I mean, the Popol Vuh as a sacred text, or the Hosea as a sacred text, all these other contributions that people of color have made, as we talk about the eighth principle in being multicultural, that's not just having dark faces to populate your lack of melanin. To me, that is the contribution of different cultures and histories to the totality of the human story. Now, there may be asymmetry around what we might call theological perspectives in the traditions that UUs call upon, to be sure, and there may never be an agreement around the symmetry of all of that. But when it comes to the liberatory project, it seems to me where we all come back together, even in the midst of our diversity, is around the issue of the liberatory project. But the liberatory project assumes that I'm okay and you're okay. It assumes that there is the humanity that is whole, but which has many dimensions in part. But if you ignore any one of those, then you're not being human. And so to say that you cherish and recognize and respect the inherent worth and dignity of all life is a contradiction if you have in fact ignored intellectually the traditions that I have come from. So I'm saying Black UUs can put another challenge on the table that's just waiting for somebody to articulate. In addition to the absence of the Black UU traditions, even those that preceded us in the early 60s, as we know, Black people have been around this tradition for a longer period of time, but they have also been ignored. Now, when it comes to the question of where goes the movement, it seems to me there is a rich reservoir of people out there who don't know much about what UUism is, but when they find out what it is as it is currently expressed, it is oftentimes perceived as elitist, and they are alienated from it because there is this bifurcation about culture and thought and reasoning and worship and the living out of the faith the way that Jesus talked about it. See, I don't compromise with people about Jesus. I will tell you I don't agree with much about what we call the church. But to not understand the revolutionary message that he tried to bring to us about love and the least and locked out and left out among us misses an opportunity for us to reintegrate everything that they've bifurcated and trifurcated. So once again, I think the lived experience of Black people in this and other traditions is begging for a new, fresh interpretation of what a living worldview, if you want to call it a theology, that's fine, except some people get worried because that assumes something about the divinity and the theism. But that's okay, we can work through all of that. But I'm saying, I think Black UUs have at their disposal the opportunity to rethink all of the intellectual and religious infrastructure that we have been forced to live with by others who develop what they call the religion. I think that can be challenged on the face of it because it is not inclusive. It doesn't tell the whole of the story, and it is a one-dimensional part of the story. And that is something that I think Blue and other progressive people together can rethink and reformulate, because the liberation of humanity from oppression and exploitation is at the central part of what it means to try to be human.
I'm always so happy whenever I get to share space with you, Baba. Thank you for all of that. I want to stay with you for this follow-up question, and then I'm coming to everyone before we open up for community conversation. Where would you like to see Blue in 10 years?
Well, I think here's what one of the ways that I think about that. I think that Blue can do something different that other religious groups have not done across the spectrum, and that is to open the door to re-examine all the assumptions we've made about what constitutes religious truth. Whether you are in denomination A or denomination B or faith tradition C or faith tradition D. You see, because I think we have spent so much of our energy and time arguing over petty theology as opposed to the liberatory question that concerns all people of goodwill. So I think there is something that the Islamic tradition offers, something that the Hebrew tradition offers, something that the Buddhist tradition offers, the Hindu traditions, the Yoruba traditions, all of the traditions of people in the world trying to do good and do right is something that we need to put on the table and say to Blue, listen, challenge all of this diversity out here that has people fussing and fighting over language, over symbols, over doctrines, over structures that come out of politics and the empire building process that was generated by the Roman Empire after the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD. That's where the story got all messed up and confused and turned around. I think Constantine and all of that piece of history. But I think Black UUs are not bound by any of these old ancient traditions. You don't have to obey them. You respect them, but you do not have to accept them as the path forward for human beings to find a way to get beyond the burdens that have been falsely imposed upon all of us as another one of the divides that we call religious division. I think Blue can go back to the fundamental question that we as Black humanists try to put on the table for everybody to rethink and reevaluate, which is isn't the essence of it all the liberatory project, trying to love thy neighbor as thyself and recognizing that the least and left out among us is the subject matter of all of this deep religious thought? Yeah, Blue, you have no constraints about thinking about that and calling other people into session and saying, let us rethink this. I mean, you should be talking to the people in the Shrine of the Black Madonna, because they offer a unique perspective on the Christian side of the aisle about all of what constitutes the liberatory project. Many of the Black caucuses in the denominations, because I visited all of them, they're struggling with the same set of issues inside of their structures. But they haven't connected, they haven't found each other. So maybe the second step after this first symposium is to try to cross those barriers in a different kind of way. I know you have begun that in this one, but maybe there's a larger project out there 10 years down the road that I think is just something is telling me that there's an opportunity to do something creatively different for all of humanity. And that maybe Blue can be that cutting edge place and that progressive voice for that future 10 years from now.
Mm. Thank you so much for that. We've been beginning to dream a little bit about what it would mean to come to the table regularly in some kind of community effort or gathering with other Black folks,
Yes.
especially across
Yes.
traditions,
Yes.
not only to learn from each other, but to worship together, and also to coordinate our organizing and liberatory on the ground work
Yes. And let me,
towards a more loving humanity.
yes, and let me say one other quick thing here. One of the things that I have been particularly studying is how Africans in the diaspora have tried to integrate their own religious and cultural traditions with the structures outside of their traditions. And it's been fascinating to me to watch that in Brazil, in Cuba, and then in Belize with the Garifuna people. And something even more fascinating, I just discovered through a world Christian historian that the people who came here in 1916 may have already been Christians, the Africans who were brought on that ship from Jamestown. There's a new argument that said they came out of the Congo, but it was a different kind of Christianity altogether. It was not what it was at war with Rome. And there's a woman named Beatrice Kemper Vita. Oh, Takia, you ought to go find her. She is so fascinating because well, anyway, that's another, I talked to you about that at the symposium, but she was a Congolese woman who had a divine child. She was crucified on Friday, and she said she rose on a Monday, and she challenged the Pope about all of this, and it caused quite an uproar in the faith and in the tradition. Now, few people have heard stories like that. That's an opportunity for Blue to tell the message in a very different, new, creative, exciting way that changes the way the narrative has been told and the way we've been confused about it in the first place. That's a powerful set of resources that I think Blue has an opportunity to just develop that for the good of the whole world.
Very exciting. Thank you so much. Can't wait for symposium, y'all. Miss Paula, coming to you. Where would you like to see Blue in 10 years?
Well, I love what you said, Baba. My vision may be not quite as big and as expansive as yours as yet, but I want to see Blue churches. I want to see Blue churches. Blue does worship and connection and community so well that, you know, it's wonderful when we get together, but we can't do it often enough. And I want to see, Elizabeth Terry, are you listening? I want to see brick and mortar, Blue, brick and mortar. But I think that it's not something that you can do in the existing UU structure, where in order to do church or worship, you've got to take into consideration everyone who's already there. So we're always compromising culturally and not able to create and to bring about what our cultural wisdom is.
Yes.
Because of the work of inclusion, which I don't knock, is just different. And so let's have a space where Blue churches could be, it would be more than a demonstration, but it would also be a demonstration of Unitarian Universalism through a different cultural experience. And again, what's universal in Unitarian Universalism will never be known unless it can be expressed through other cultural experiences and other identities. I have experienced it worshiping with UUs in Africa. So I've seen it, I've experienced it with Blue. And I think in order for Blue to really be included in the association, it would have to be with your own church, at least one. I could see 2 to 4 in 10 years. And people, look, build it and they will come, right? I think there are a lot of people who would resonate with UU theology, but not with the traditional culture in our churches. But in a Blue space, I think people of color would gravitate towards this. Like, it would just be amazing. I read something just recently that the growth is going to come from the margins. The growth is going to come from the margins. So let's go ahead and plant it and put it out there and let it grow.
Thank you. Definitely resonating with us over here. Miss Carol, coming to you. Where would you like to see Blue in 10 years?
What she said. Did you hear? Really, I thought the only thing I had to add is that I would like to see us definitely have a symposium every year that would be so popular that we would quickly become oversubscribed and you would move around from place to place. So that would be one thing I would definitely like to see us do. I would like to see perhaps regional gatherings, you know, and those could be the basis for determining where Black congregations could have a place. So as I said, in the main, it's what she said. I just think that the embodiment of the Black UU experience can really ideally be expressed in a Black space.
Yeah, thank you for that. I have to say, you know, some of y'all know I'm originally from Buffalo, New York. So growing up on that Canadian border where I had, you know, tons of folks who lived in Buffalo but worked in Canada growing up. And then my current academic work takes me to the UK a lot. And I've been thinking, of course, a lot about Blue spiritual communities on the ground, but also what they might look like in an international context, in these border crossing international, what would it look, I haven't connected with Black UUs in London, but I know they're there. What would it look like to have a Blue community there? What would it look like to have Blue communities in Toronto? Those possibilities are very, very exciting. Miss Elizabeth, did you share your vision? Where'd you like to see Blue in 10 years?
I didn't yet, but mine was similar to yours, about like an international feel and actuality of Blue. And I think that one of the most revolutionary things about Blue is this concept of UU adjacent people. As I feel that like sort of the main UU churches, like they whine and complain about the UU adjacent people, but do nothing to bring them in. So I think that this beautiful thing of Blue from the get-go, saying that UU adjacent, just bringing that concept to the UU movement is so revolutionary. And yeah, why wouldn't there be a call like this where there's 100 people on it? Hello, why not? So like sort of like, it's not a numbers game that I'm talking about. It's about an infiltration into an expansion of Black culture with UU and UU adjacent people, so that community is formed in a really, really powerful way.
Yeah, we are committed to, from the beginning, engaging, Black folks beyond congregational walls and, Black folks in other traditions. I'm excited that we're going to have some Black Quaker folks at the symposium. I've been calling them Black Quakers. I've been calling them bakers, coming to share space with us. But certainly also that, our love and commitment to liberation isn't just for people who identify as we identify, right? And that it's critical that we embrace UU adjacent folks who may never claim Unitarian Universalism as their identity, but who resonate with our commitments for love and liberation and community. Ms. Carmelita, I'm coming to you. Where would you like to see Blue in 10 years?
During the previous, it's related. I sort of hesitate to disagree with other elders like my sister and perhaps Sister Elizabeth Terry. I'm not certain if it's a disagreement, because I feel it's important that we be big enough to encompass lots of ideas. But I'm thinking that for me, Blue is bigger than brick and mortar. The idea of Blue and what Blue stands for and identities may go beyond, is something that can be in every UU space that exists. And I think it is important, and I would love to have somebody tell me how that is different from separating ourselves from everybody else, sort of going back to my community idea. But another thing I wanted to say is that for us not to, Blue, I think, can help the world learn that whites elect for us who are good people and who are bad people, who are good UUs and who are bad UUs. And we should not allow our scene to participate in who are the good Black people and who are the bad Black people. You're a good Black person, so I accept you. You're not a good Black person, so I don't accept you. So I wanted to communicate, and maybe I can talk to people offline about how that is not separating ourselves from the rest of humanity.
Well, I think to that point, one of the things that's
I'd love to what to say.
I think one of the things that's important to acknowledge that, Blue has taken into consideration from the beginning is that Black folks have all kinds of families, right? Black folks have children that are not Black. Black folks have spouses and friends that are not Black. That's true for people on the organizing collective board. So it's something that we've been, talking about and thinking about and consciously aware of since the beginning. And it's the tension of choosing to hold space that is sacred for Black folks when it's needed, but to also invite other folks into our space with the understanding that Blackness is still at the center, right? One of the first times we're going to get to do that and experience it together in community will be a symposium. And part of the reason why we made the decision to make symposium open to white folks and non-Black people of color is because Black Unitarian Universalist theology, worldview is useful for everybody. You don't have to be Black for those ideas to be liberatory for you. You don't have to be Black to be blessed by those ideas and to find, peace and comfort in them. But it's also a time, particularly for folks who have a different kind of privilege, to practice what it is to be in community that doesn't center them. So what's it gonna be like for white folks to come into Blue space and be welcomed and fed and loved on, because we gonna be who we are, but it's gonna sound Black and look Black and be Black, uncompromisingly. Kind of like, I think about my grandmother who for her whole life was in the AME church, African Methodist Episcopal Church. And there were white folks who were a member of her congregation, who chose to be in that community. But they chose to be in that community with the understanding that the history of that community came out of a certain context, and the prioritization of African American history and ways of thinking was going to be at the center of the worship. And they chose, to be in that space. So I think, to your point, we're still moving and leaning towards that communitarian ethic, and also doing it in a way that allows folks who are used to having their culture sort of be the norm, learn what it is for that not to be so all the time, so that we can sort of share space a little bit. Miss Paula, I think I see you wanting to say something. You want to unmute yourself?
I do, yeah. So that's what I'm talking about. When I talk about Blue churches, I'm not talking about exclusively Black. I'm talking about Blue centered, Blue managed, Blue controlled. There are a lot of people who are not African American who need this. I know a lot of them who are not happy or satisfied with just the status quo. And if Blue were an option, Blue centered, if Blue were an option, you would have multicultural churches, because people would be fed. There are a lot of people who really are looking or engaged in the liberation theology and would appreciate, I think, one, being led by it, but two, being in the community of people who are really in hot pursuit. And I don't mean pursuit through the lens of dominant culture, but real liberation theology or community. But I still think that you would need to have Blue churches in order to do that, because there are too many compromises that you would have to make along the way, if not.
I would just say I need to open up our time to other folks who are assembled here who have comments or questions. But I will say, 360 Elders, this is something that we will, of course, be seeking your advisement and direction and guidance on as Blue continues to grow and shift and build. One of the challenges to, this desire for Blue churches or Blue spiritual communities as we're envisioning them is, and I'm going to say, I'm trying to say this gingerly, but I got to be me. There is also concerns about, a shortage of existing trained leadership to manage those communities. And I don't mean manage from like a corporate sense, but if it is important for us to have folks who are grounded both in Unitarian Universalism and in a Black liberationist mode, shepherding these spiritual communities in some way, then something about the way in which Unitarian Universalist ministers, chaplains, leaders are currently being trained and fellowshipped and all of that has got to shift. And it may just be that we have to come up with a way to do that, but that's a big part of it that I think sometimes gets missed in these conversations is, we're trying to build things that are sustainable and lasting and excellent for our people. But that is a decidedly, you can't necessarily just take someone who's grounded in another tradition and plop them into a Unitarian Universalist context if you have a commitment to the growth and propagation of Unitarian Universalism. So there are challenges there, but it's beautiful to hear what everyone is thinking about, this commitment to community, this commitment to deep spiritual engagement, this commitment to being together, and wrestling with these issues together as Black people. Okay, then Miss Elizabeth, I'm going to start with you. Any final remarks that you want to share before we close out? Take a couple minutes.
Well, something that I think of often, and this evening had me think of it again and live in it again, is that I was raised in a pretty conservative Baptist household and congregation. But I was always a Universalist, and I was never baptized in that congregation, which did not go over well. But all of that to say is that I view myself as culturally Baptist, but theologically Unitarian Universalist. And what I mean by culturally Baptist is like loving singing and praying, and it's okay if I'm the amen corner of one in my congregation, because that's who I am, and it's like I don't know how to do anything else. And there's like sort of this interesting tension around me being that amen corner in most UU congregations, where like the heads whip around, like who's doing that? And it's like this weird thing that I now understand of like a lot of people of European descent sitting in the room with me want to be hollering out, amen. And that goes to, I can't remember who said it earlier, about there are people who are not of African descent that are going to their congregations and not being nourished. And they're not being nourished because it's like this very bland culture there. So like, I am so excited that we bring all of ourselves to our congregations, and we bring the Black culture up in there, even if we're only one person. That's kind of exhausting, but that's who I am. That's what I bring. And I know that we each bring something to congregations if we're members of congregations, and we bring something here to Blue that makes it so much richer and so lovely and beautiful. And I keep on using this word nourishing because that's what it is. My soul gets nourished at Blue.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, I've gotten those looks too, because I will show up with my little shaker or my tambourine and be the only one expressing the way I need to express. But I think Blue, in some ways, has helped give folks permission to lean into an unapologetic expression of Blackness, whatever that is for them. And that's a life-giving good thing. Miss Paula, coming to you. Any thoughts you want to share with us, Miss Paula?
Yeah, you had asked a question earlier about what you hope Black people would embrace. I want Black people to own Unitarian Universalism, own it, put your stake in the ground, and make it what you need it to be. And I think that ownership will make a big difference, and Blue does give permission, not only permission for it, but Blue gives people staying power, being able to come and engage with Blue, then going back into the wider faith community, I think is helping people. We know it's helping people to stay. But the other thing is, I wish that I could see all of the faces on the screen. I'm on my phone. I wish Blue health and clarity and the kind of cohesiveness that will carry you for a long time, because the community, the collective, is absolutely critical to the long-term cultural change. So I hope that everyone stays healthy enough, and that you all keep all of the negative energy resolved over and over and over again, so that you can stay the course, because this is much, much needed, and I'd hate to see it do anything other than blossom.
That's beautiful.
Thank you for that, Ms. Paula.
Thank you for that. Strong words there, strong admonition. Miss Carol, how about you? Any closing words for us?
I've had the occasion to be in a church for a funeral, and that church was actually built by, I guess, one generation ago by Black people who were not welcome in white churches. We built our own churches. So I think that the arc of history of Blue building its own community, whether virtual or physical, as well as Blue having a physical presence, is part of our story, and it makes sense for it to be part of our story. So that's what I'm left with.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for connecting us to that history so intentionally. That's really, really important. Baba, are you here with us?
Yes.
Final thoughts to share with us?
Yeah. I think that excuse me, I think that the recent history of our people in this country as the moral voice for historical clarification of the errors that this society has made, that white supremacy has imposed upon all of us and has corrupted everybody's humanity. That part of the broader mission of Blue is to try and rectify in a very fundamental way the ways that Unitarian Universalism has corrupted Black humanity. I think Unitarian Universalism is still very much a Eurocentrically grounded apparatus, which doesn't mean every congregation is, but I think the cultural trajectory of the institution is distinctly Eurocentric. And just as Black caucuses in other denominations serve to be a corrective to the distortions within the churches that they were a part of, and to correct the distortions in the Christian traditions that the Christian church has had to live with, the way that it de-Africanized the faith itself and confused the messages of Jesus. I think equally so, Blue has a task of that magnitude to de-Europeanize and to de-Europeanize the trajectory of UUism, so that the usage of the term multicultural is more than just darkening some spaces that are uncolored, but that indeed it means a reorientation of the entire experience of what it means to be a spiritually grounded person. That Blue indeed becomes a corrective to that distortion, because I think it's that distortion that keeps people away, Black and white and other, from what UUism always had the potential to become. But its orientation has limited its ability to reach out across lines because it's so monochromatic, if you would. So I think that the mission that Blue is articulating by ebonizing the environment is one that gives it an extraordinarily unique responsibility and mission that I think history will reward it very kindly. However it winds up evolving, the task of ebonizing the Eurocentric trajectory of the denomination will be more than worth the corrective at the end of the day, because it will put on the table a definitely different way of understanding what it means to be religiously human, what it means to be a spiritually grounded person, what it means to connect to the transcendent sources, and what it means to live one's life with a commitment to the liberatory project. And that is a lesson introduced in our day, in our way, and we made some progress. But now that torch, again, as I keep saying, has been passed to this generation in a different way, in a different time. And then, of course, you've got that difficult, broken world of our people that's out there that needs all the help we can bring to them to help us make our schools work better, and to build our families in a different way, to improve the economics of our community, to keep our politicians accountable, that the nation building work that has to be done on the secular side of the aisle is very critical, the justice work that we have to do. And we hope that Blue gets to the point where it sees itself as having a mission on the outside in addition to what it does on the inside, because the need for love is just as great, if not greater, on the outside in those communities as it is on the inside. But the one supports the other. They are not dichotomous that way, but they are continuous that way. And so I'm hoping that as you Europeanize the structure and trajectory of the denomination, that you also are able to integrate your mission and your message on the inside in the fabric of African descended communities, especially to help help us deal with the problems that we experience there on a day-to-day basis, that all religious people everywhere are struggling very hard to try to figure out how to do that. And so it's a complicated task. Blue cannot do it all alone, but I think it's important that Blue also work on the problems that we find that white supremacy has done to our people and to our communities, and be a corrective there in conjunction and collaboration with others, just as you, I hope, will continue to de-Europeanize the Eurocentric trajectory of the Unitarian Universalist denomination.
And if y'all didn't hear nothing else, just take the word ebonizing and tuck that in your chest.
Tuck it.
As you move through the rest of your week. Ms. Carmelita, let me come to you. Final thoughts you want to share with the community assembled?
Thank you. And I do say that what I've received here, I agree very much with what Paula, Carol, Elizabeth, and Baba said. And I want to say, I feel, and I haven't been able to say that for a long time, I've been churched today. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Reverend Michael, we're coming to you for announcements.
Yes. Well, first of all, just thank you all so much for this brilliance, for this love, for this possibility, right? For far too long, in far more spaces than we can count, we have been put in a position to hinder, right, what we otherwise know in our hearts and our minds and our bodies and our souls is possible. And so grateful that we are moving forward with possibility in all of this ministry and all this work that we've been talking about, and all this life and community that we've been talking about and that we've been building, right? We've been saying this a few times in worship. We're not just dreaming about this and talking about it as if it's somewhere in the future. It's actually happening right here, right now. It's actually happening in this room as part of this conversation, as part of all the conversations. So I'm deeply grateful for that and for all of you. Of course, as we said in the beginning, we said to ourselves in 2018, we're going to do a theology year in 2019. And that is where we have been, and that is where we still are. And we have been on the road to Symposium ever since that day that we articulated that vision. And even before the day that we articulated it, we've been on that trajectory. And so here we are. We're going to be in St. Paul together, friends, October 30th through November 2nd. The Harper Jordan Memorial Symposium will be taking place. The planning has been going on for a year now, Takia. More than that, I can't even wrap my mind around it. But it's happening. The food's been ordered. We all know where we're staying. We know who's coming. It is going to be one of the most powerful experiences, certainly in my life. And I think that's probably going to be true for all of us. So if you have not registered, we hope that you're able to come. You can go to our website and find all of that good information, blacklivesuu.com/about, to get to the page where you can register and book accommodations and see the schedule and all of those things. We're really, really excited about it. It's coming. It's coming. It's coming. And of course, don't hesitate to reach out to any of us if you have any questions or concerns about your attendance. We hope that you can make it. And in the meantime, of course, all of the things that Blue does in the regular course of things, in ordinary time, as they say some places, we're continuing to do those things. First Thursday worship is coming up next week on October 3rd at 9 p.m. Eastern. So we'll have worship on the first Thursday and the third Sunday in October. Be on the lookout for New to Blue sessions. If you're new or new-ish to the community and you want to come and ask questions and learn a little bit more about Blue, you've gotten a big taste here. But we're going to do a New to Blue on October 1st next week. So we're looking forward to seeing folks there. I think those are the big announcements. Of course, one of the things that we are doing at Symposium is having our inaugural annual meeting. That is a very big deal, y'all. A lot of work went into us becoming an independent organization, and so it matters that our beloveds, all the folks who are active and a part of our membership structure, are able to be there and hear about the things that are going on in Blue and be able to vote on matters of importance. So if you are not a beloved and would like to be a part of that gathering, I believe folks can do that up until October 1st. So definitely, if you're not signed up to become a beloved, please do that by October 1st. I think that's it. Is there anything else, Takia?
The only thing I would add is if for some reason you cannot join us in St. Paul for Symposium,
Yep.
you know, Blue is all about leveraging technology. So you can go to blacklivesuu.com/live, and for $15 you can register to see a live stream.
That's right.
Of all of the plenary sessions that will be happening at Symposium.
Hey. Thank you, Leon.
As well as some other things that we're going to throw in. So if you just can't be there, we know some of our folks have to work, some of our folks have other commitments, but if you're interested in being able to access the conversations that are happening at Symposium, just go to blacklivesuu.com/live, and for $15 you can see all of the plenary sessions that'll be taking place at Symposium. If you're in a congregation that you know would be interested in live streaming the plenaries at their congregation for folks to come together and watch, we know some folks are doing that too. That's perfectly fine. That's great. We really tried to do everything we could to get, to make this event accessible with the sliding scale registration and all of that. But we understand that there are still barriers, and we would hope that live stream would be a way for you to be able to engage. Maybe you can get together with some other folks in your community and have a little watch party and watch the plenaries and engage in the content that we're having there as well. So doing everything we can to make sure that people can access the information that's going to be shared at Symposium.
That's right. That's right.
That's all I have. Want to thank everybody again for making some time this evening to come out and be together. We're going to sign off now. So I would ask everybody to just unmute yourself. Go ahead, unmute yourself and say goodbye to everybody.
Bye, y'all.
Bye. Goodbye.
See you in Minneapolis.
Love you. See you at
Take care.
Take care, everybody. We love you. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you, elders.
Bye.
We love you. Thank you.
Enjoy.
Good night, y'all.
Come to worship next week, y'all. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.